What dark creature? In February of 2013, in a sleepy suburb in Denver, my old high school friend Paul stayed at my house. Paul had been kicked out of his parents' house. He was jobless and penniless and didn't have a car. He had no money for food, so he had been starving before moving in with me, slowly wasting away. I could sense he had suffered a deep hurt I couldn't begin to heal, but at least I could provide him a calm, clean environment with a full fridge, if only for a few weeks. At this time, Paul and I were meditating a lot, hours at a time, and we spent our days experimenting with our own thoughts. We both agreed that it was becoming easier to clear our minds of all the clutter and focus on the meditation. One night, I turned on the TV and came across the movie Contact, which neither of us had seen, so we watched it. It was about human contact with alien civilizations through means of consciousness and thought. As I went to sleep that night, with Paul sleeping in the room next door, I meditated on the power of consciousness and what other worlds I could reach through intention alone. It almost seemed scary to know that my thoughts could attract the attention of other beings, and I wondered if I could make contact by simply thinking about them. The next morning I met Paul in the kitchen. He hadn't gotten a lot of sleep, looked pale, and was silent. Finally, he told me that last night he'd heard the most alien noises outside my house, somewhere near the driveway. I hadn't heard anything, as I had been fast asleep. He described the sound as something he had never heard before, a strange, guttural, choking, howling noise, which repeated itself again and again in the same pattern. He was too afraid to look outside the window, but the noise eventually stopped. I tried to come up with a rational explanation for it, but he knew it wasn't an animal because the choking had sounded almost human. Perhaps it had been a sick person coughing outside, but this thing had stayed by my driveway for at least 30 minutes, repeating the same call with expert precision and strength. When I asked him if he could imitate the call, he said there was no way he could. I thought if I would have heard it, I would have looked out the window. I wondered what dark creature I might have seen. Paul admitted that his greatest fear was to look out and see a copy of himself or me out there in the street, staring back at him. That sent a chill through me because I agreed. I believe only he was meant to hear that noise, and I think it was his own way of facing his demons. Recently, I spoke with Paul, who was living with a roommate. He had 2 jobs and seemed to be doing much better. I think he faced his dark side that night, felt the helpless despair, and now had overcome it. Some months later, after that first visitation, I had a dream. In the dream, I was in a sauna/bathhouse, and a tune was playing on a flute somewhere that put me to sleep, and I sank into the water until only my face was showing. I watched everything from a third-person perspective, as snakes crawled out of my head, brightly colored, and I could tell very poisonous. My face changed colors like war paint. Half of my face was painted yellow and the other red. Then a figure rose out of my body, like a spirit sporting that war paint. As it rose from the water, I felt tremendous pain in my solar plexus, like a tearing or ripping. I then became the griffin creature, and I knew that I was trapped in this world, unless I killed the man outside who had summoned me there. Even though I was yet to see Paul's new house, I knew exactly where he lived in this town. I flew to his porch on large scaly wings, proceeded up the dusty path, there in the middle of the night, barely casting a shadow in the yellow moon, and rapped a talon on his window. As a signal to prove that it was his good friend outside, I began to howl. I wondered if he would look outside this time, and I watched his blinds with my eagle eyes, searching for any detection, for any disturbance. And when they came, and I saw the sash thrown back, I waited for our eyes to meet and for the connection to be made. I waited for the invitation inside. I never did speak to Paul again, or to anyone for that matter. All I can do is howl now, visiting people I once knew, sometimes meeting their eyes through the window pane, and sometimes waiting for hours for the sun. No, I don't really speak to many people these days, only in short radio broadcast bursts that I send to select people with sharp minds to hear my howl. If you are hearing this now, we've made a connection. And if you've made a connection with me, you've also formed a bond with it. And I hope you will be one of the brave ones who was willing to open the blinds and look out, to lay eyes on your old friend once again,